Thank you for joining this OCCRL webinar, which is the third one in a series on post-secondary pathways for former foster care youth.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Nidia Ruedas-Gracia, and I am an assistant professor in the Educational Psychology Department at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. My research interests include exploring how sociocultural factors influence academic performance and psychological well-being among minoritized individuals. Particularly, I study sense of belonging, including how this phenomenon is experienced among different populations and how sense of belonging impacts key life outcomes such as educational attainment and mental health. Today's webinar will discuss understanding and fostering sense of belonging, along with implications for foster care youth and community college students. During our time together, I will discuss the conceptualization of sense of belonging, understanding it among special populations, its influence on life outcomes, and some implications for staff and faculty supporting foster care youth. So, what is sense of belonging? Sense of belonging is the extent to which an individual feels personally accepted, respected, included, and supported by others in the social environment. In the social environment of schools, for example, sense of school belonging would encompass how much a student feels accepted, respected, included, and supported by their friends, other peers, teachers, administration, etc. at their school. So, who needs it? Well, sense of belonging is a feeling that you might not miss until it's gone. Thus, individuals that are most in need of feeling a sense of belonging are those that have either not received a sufficient amount or those that may not have other means within that context to establish a sense of belonging. And what does it look like? Well, a sense of belonging takes on heightened importance in certain contexts, at certain times, and among certain populations. This element of belonging brings attention to the dynamic nature of belonging. Belonging is not a feeling that stays constant throughout time. In fact, belonging levels fluctuate depending on the context that one is in and one's social positionality. If we establish that belonging is a dynamic process, we recognize that belonging is not as one-dimensional as we might think, and more of a kaleidoscopic type construct that is multi-dimensional and ever-changing dependent on the context, time, and social position. There are many cultural products in our social world that can signal whether or not we belong in that space. Some cultural signals you may be familiar with are food, music, statues, and how other people look and act in that new space that you're in. For example, I feel instant sense of belonging when I go to an event and the food served is familiar to me. That food can be the connection between my culture and the new culture that I'm now in. As mentioned in the previous slide, belonging is a phenomenon that might be hard to be conscious of if you don't normally encounter threats to belonging. Thus, it may be difficult for individuals in your new environment to empathize or notice products that may signal non-belonging to others in the group, if they themselves have not experienced threats to belonging in that setting. A common signal of non-belonging can be experienced around cultural mismatch between two cultures. For example, in my food example previously as a signal of belonging, we can imagine me feeling a low sense of belonging if I go to that same work event and the food served is unfamiliar to me. If I had never seen that type of food before and no one around me seems to be familiar with the type of food that I'm familiar with, then there would be a strong cultural mismatch in food preferences, leading me to perhaps feel a little out of place. For different individuals, different situations may lead to feeling a low sense of belonging. For example, for foster youth, frequently changing residential placements and schools is not conducive to establishing a sense of belonging to any one context. For community college students, the college setting may house signals of non-belonging, such as, say, a tutoring service during hours that are not amenable to community college students that have to work full-time and thus can't benefit from that service. Setting aside a more inclusive tutoring hour or tutoring hours would signal to students that their needs are included within the fabric of the college environment. For former foster youth in college, social isolation and marginalization could be powerful indicators of belonging or not belonging. For example, college traditions such as Parent Day could signal to former foster youth that the college may not understand or value the different parent relationships that former foster youth may or may not espouse. Maintaining a healthy sense of belonging is important for many reasons, some being that it impacts different parts of our lives, such as our academic performance and our mental health. Sense of belonging can influence grades, retention, academic motivation, stress, and mental health issues and physical health issues such as non-suicidal self-injuries. Some ways to boost belonging levels among members of your group or school, including foster care youth and former foster care youth, are to create cultural matches, promote a culture of vulnerability, and encourage cultural cognizance. Some ways to create cultural matches include strengthening the presence of identity-relevant representations. For example, in colleges, hiring faculty, administration, and student affairs staff that were former foster youth could signal to students that people like them are valued and respected in the college. Another way is to recognize and support the development and understanding of intersectional identities. For example, if former foster youth can't find a space on campus that signals belonging related to their former foster youth identity, they may be able to find space in organizations tied to their other identities. For example, racial ethnic themed centers or gender identity-based Greek organizations. Thus, maintaining strong connection to all of their identities can illuminate the various spaces on campus for them. In other words, there can be more opportunities for cultural matches. Another way is to incorporate college support programs specific to individuals' identities. Therefore, if not yet in existence, support programs specifically tailored to former foster youth, especially those with intersectional identities such as former foster youth who are women or former foster youth who are of color, may boost their sense of belonging. Practitioners can also promote a culture of vulnerability, where all students recognize that their diverse identities and perspectives are valued, and where we encourage to have conversations and productive interactions among one another. Staff and faculty can also encourage cultural cognizance via different mechanisms which could emphasize how special populations such as former foster youth or racial ethnic quote-unquote minorities are in actuality a part of the global majority. Thanks for listening to this webinar. If you have any questions about topics discussed in this webinar or about other aspects of my work, feel free to reach out by email at nrgracia, that's nrgracia @illinois.edu. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at nrgracia.
We appreciate your interest in advancing post-secondary pathways for former foster care youth. Please join future webinars focusing on equitable student outcomes for diverse youth and adults, hosted by the OCCRL scholars who are involved with this project. You can discover more at occrl.illinois.edu.